Away we go. So welcome everybody to our May workshop here. Glad to have everybody with us. A couple of quick announcements and then we'll get the festivities started. So again, welcome to L&D Philadelphia. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Josh Mayleaf. I am the president and co-founder of L&D Philadelphia. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are members, thank you for being members. Also here tonight, if you run into any difficulties during the workshop, Vicki McDevitt is our producer for this evening, so she'll be here to help. She'll be checking the chat, monitoring things as we go. So likewise, Paul, if you need any assistance, she can help you out there as well. Also like to welcome our board members, or my fellow board members, I should say, Mike Brenner, who is our vice president of programming. Say hi, Mike.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
And Suzanne Comer, who is our secretary.
Hello, everyone.
There we go. So couple of things, not too many announcements tonight, but wanted to call out a couple of things. First of all, we have a survey out there that many of you may have taken. If you haven't, it's been sent out the last couple of Thursdays. We are currently trying to get a pulse on what's going on in the community, what topics you're interested in. If even beyond the survey at any point in time, please feel free to send an email to us at info@ldphilly.com. We're in an interesting new world now and trying to figure out things of like what the mix of virtual to in-person should be. We're going to keep the virtual meetings as a component of what we do, in part because it's been fantastic to get speakers from all over the world, although I think the world right now is basically the US and the UK. Although stay tuned on that, have some prospects coming from Canada and possibly Australia. So we're going to try to expand that a little bit. But if you have any ideas for topics, locations, any of the above, please A, take the survey if you haven't already, and B, feel free to email us. And then what we do have coming up is our next scheduled event at this point is going to be in August, which is 25 things you didn't know PowerPoint could do. It's an encore presentation. We did it a few years ago. It is excellent if you have not seen it. Diane Elkins, who was up here for our storyline boot camp, does this, and PowerPoint does a lot of stuff. And if you haven't been through one of these, or even if you have, it's a good reminder of some of the tools that you have at your disposal. You may notice it's a little bit of a jump to there. So reason being is with current conditions and what's going on with COVID, we made the decision to postpone a couple of in-person events that we've had on the schedule. So keep checking back. I anticipate that we're going to be adding some things. We're working on an outdoor networking event so we can keep everybody safe and still gathering, as well as some other virtual events this summer. And the plan at this point is to return to some in-person programming in September. So as we all know, it's a moving target right now, so stay tuned. The good news too is, in addition to us, and again, I promise you we will have more stuff coming, we also have our partners and sponsors, and there's a bunch of events coming up there throughout the community. So I encourage you to come to our website. You all had to register for this, so you've been on our website. I encourage you to come there, check out, see what's coming up, and if there's things there that may also be of use for you. Additionally, a couple other things I want to call out. For those of you who are members, thank you. If you're not and you want to join, it's only $25 a year, as it says right on the screen. I wish I had timed that, but it just worked that way. One of the things you get as a member when you log in is member resources, and you can go to workshop recordings. It's actually also right here as a quick link. This workshop and all the other ones that we've done over the last 2 years, and some even further back than that, are recorded. If you want the short version, thanks to our producer extraordinaire tonight, Vicki, she also edits. And we have recaps. So if you want the 5-minute version, you can get that. And then if you're enticed by the 5-minute version, you can watch the whole thing. So you'll find that on our website, along with our podcast. There's another episode about to drop on augmented reality, where I interviewed one of our past speakers, Betty Danowitz. So stay tuned for that. And a couple other things just to point out. If you do tweet, feel free to tweet along with us. We are at LD Philly. And we also have a job board going. So if you are looking or if you are hiring, members can log in and post jobs there at any time. So please share any jobs that you have that you may be looking for. And if you are looking, it's a good resource. And then I'm going to come down to and take a moment to thank our sponsors. Judge Learning Solutions. I didn't see anybody on here, I don't think, but if you're here from Judge, speak now. That's a no. All right, so Judge Solutions is our Learning Solutions is our website sponsor. You can find their info literally on every page on our website. And they do a couple of things. One, back to hiring or looking for work. They do placement for people for, again, if you're hiring and need to find people, they have people, or if you want to be part of their stable of people to look for things, reach out to them. The other thing they do is custom content development. And more at judge.com, as it says there. If you click on that banner on any page, you'll get more info. And then the other sponsor I want to call out tonight is our email sponsor, which is Degreed and Katie.
Hey Josh, thanks for the intro. Hey everybody, nice to see some faces I know already. Apologies if you can hear my dogs in the background. They've been cooped up a little today. If you're not familiar, Degreed is a learning experience platform, and I'm a sales director for the organization. I spend a lot of time with clients and prospective clients. In the chat, I'm going to share a post we did semi recently that I think really aligns with this topic tonight. So one of the things we focus on is engagement. It's really become a core, just a metric any learning technology, modern learning technology should really enable. So one of the things we found is engagement. And in that blog, there's a couple of different ways to think about that and some examples. So engagement, social, content, and skills are some of the things that we share with our clients, and we look to measure value based on what we're doing with them, where they're finding success. So there's some great stuff in there. And I'll share just a quick story related to, again, measuring impact. Sorry. Verizon is one of our customers who in the pandemic was able to leverage Degreed, and the insight we had around their employees to understand what skills did they have. So they were able to look at that data and then shift folks who were in stores to on the phone. So they were able to upskill quickly, and some of the metrics they found were over 7,000 people were deployed in 9 weeks. And because of that, they were able to answer about 4 million more customer calls. And that led to some improved success metrics around customer satisfaction. So just one example for how learning data can help you really define and show value to the business. So if you'd like to learn more, please reach out. Otherwise, I'm really excited to be here. So thanks for the time, Josh.
Had to find my mute button, so thank you, Katie. All right, so with that, again, we're going to turn it over for introducing our speaker, and they'll hand that to Mike along with some intro music. So as requested, Paul.
I can't, I can't live up to those standards. Thank you anyway, though.
You sure? We'll get some
Yeah,
clapping going and stuff.
Let me pump.
We got to get everybody up, right? All right, Mike. We got some rockers in this audience.
Nice.
All right, Mike, you're on.
The heck was that? Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I had the great pleasure of, well, just like you, all of you, I get clobbered almost every day with countless webinars and online sessions and things, most of which I ignore. But I did not ignore one that I saw several months ago featuring our speaker tonight. And I was glad I did not ignore it, because frankly, it's not a topic that I would normally gravitate to, but for some reason I did. Call it fate. But I was really impressed with Paul and his not only his breadth of knowledge, but his demeanor and his overall presentation skills I thought were exceptional. So Josh, can you give Paul, there you go. Okay. So Paul is an IO psychologist with over 18 years of experience developing measurement strategies and evaluating the impact of employee training initiatives for top Fortune 100 companies around the world. He's a leading author and thought leader on the topic of training impact and ROI. He's a pioneer and innovator in the training industry, creating new and simple ways to measure business impact and actually developing a new level 6 to the traditional 5 levels of evaluation. So I reached out to Paul in February with regard to speaking for us, and he graciously agreed, and he is with us here tonight. And I hope you enjoy him as much as I did a few months ago when I first heard him. So Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you, and welcome.
Thank you, Mike. And I have to, the 15 minutes that we chatted is what made me want to come here. I mean, it was just such a great conversation. So I already ruined my first joke. I was going to spend 45 minutes on dog training instead, just because that before we get to humans. I usually put this up when a lot of people are rolling in. They see this, they get out, they think they're in the wrong presentation. I get spooked by large audiences. So anyway, all right. So actually, the other title that I had for this was how do you find, and this really works in some cases, how do you finally shut up those skeptical stakeholders, how to measure and maximize the impact of training. Everybody, I think I'm half kidding here. It feels like that's what we in L&D need to do for a lot of finance and business leaders that don't really believe in the impact of training. So I think we need to get out there more and do more of these kind of case studies. I won't go over this. Who the bleep am I? You could look me up on LinkedIn. So let me jump right in. And so I don't check the chat much. I'm horrible at multitasking. So I would appreciate if anybody had questions, just jump right in. If you want to put them in the chat, I'll probably miss them. So if somebody else is monitoring, that's fine because I'm in presentation mode. But why we measure, right? So in kind of line of what I was talking about, why don't clients, so there's a question, why don't clients, leaders, and or stakeholders understand the true value training bring to an organization? Think about that question. The answer is because we never tell them. So it's on, what I mean by this is it's on us. Business leaders are not going to go out and do these studies. Finance people are not going to go out and find out how much return on investment we're bringing to the organization. The only people that care about these initially are L&D people. So we need to do these case studies and we need to present these results to finance and business leaders and CEOs and organizations. No one else is going to do it. So this might be you, this might be someone else that you know. So when somebody says you spent this on training, how did it impact the bottom line? I like this picture. Of course, I added the other stuff and copied that in. But I like this picture because, right, she's looking, or he, in other cases, she's looking over her shoulder. She seems very worried that she's going to be asked this question about the benefit of training. And the point here is why keep looking over your shoulder and be worried that you're going to be asked this question. So I would say proactively go out and hit this question head on, right? And what would you do if somebody asked, think about this for your own organizations and your own groups. What would you do if somebody asked you tomorrow if the training program worked, one that you were responsible for? The other thing is how would you feel if they just wondered it or doubted the impact of training, which is where I think most organizations are, right? I'm exaggerating. Nobody's going to yell at you unless you're really unlucky. Nobody's going to yell at you from behind and say, well, you know, did this have any impact? I think most HR leaders, business leaders, they understand that they need to do a lot of employee development, but they just don't know how to quantify that. And you certainly have your skeptics out there that are always wondering or always doubting how much value L&D brings to the bottom line. And that's where we don't want to be. So this is kind of corny, but if the only way L&D can ever show their true value to the business is to quantify the benefits instead of just the costs and be budget makers instead of budget takers. I know that sounds corny. What I mean by that is if you think about what we always have in front of us, those are the costs, right? In excruciating detail, right down to the dollars and cents. This is everything we spent, and we have a ledger, right? I mean, we have a list of everything down to the dollars and cents of what we spent on training. The one thing we don't have to balance that out is the list of benefits that training brings. So hopefully by the end of this program or the end of this hour, you'll be able to at least start to try to stack some of those benefits together and think of what I call the story of impact that you want to tell to your business leaders and stakeholders. Right? The funniest part about all this is when I started presenting these findings, and I worked at American Express and Verizon, and done a lot of external consulting work. When I present these findings, the biggest surprise is that people within L&D are surprised that training works, which is unsettling to a certain degree, because are you sure, Paul, that those findings are, and I think to myself, so you've been, in this field for 20, 25 years, and you really wake up every morning not thinking that what you're doing is having an impact. So be satisfied that yes, you are having an impact, and I'll show you some studies to prove that. Okay, so just a couple of other things when I try to get people excited about doing these type of studies, as I had in the previous slide, right? 92% of senior leaders want this stuff, and 9% of internal L&D organizations actually show them this stuff, which is a huge gap, right? Glaring abyss or difference delta between what they want and what we give them. The other thing is bigger budget. So I used to read a lot of nominations for ATD and Training Magazine and a couple of other ones. And I used to kind of keep track of these organizations that were sending in what they're doing, right? So they send these applications, they talk about their training budget on one question, and then another question asks them, do you measure and show proof that you measure up to level 3 and 4, which is behavior change and business impact. And what I found after doing correlations, probably with 100 or so different companies, 216 actually, what I found was there was a strong correlation to people who had much, much bigger training budgets, also measured up to level 3 and 4. So some people might say that's a correlation, not a causation, but the linkage, the fact that people measuring up to level 3 and 4 have higher budgets is one thing. Another thing is if you already have a high budget, the fact that you decide to measure level 3 and 4 is another strong linkage, right? So not necessarily saying there's a causation here, but there's a strong correlation, and that means a lot. Next thing here is, and probably the most important thing, if you measure the impact of your training, you could maximize the impact the next time around. So I've done studies where we have one training program, we measure it, we find out what's driving the impact and return on investment. We put a little bit more into that, the next iteration, and we have amazingly better results the next time around. Sometimes even higher than 75%. Okay, any questions on those? Okay, so we want to quantify the true value of L&D work. So let me just take a poll. I don't have the poll kind of prepared, and I thought this might in a smaller group. I do these polls all the time in conferences and places that I'm speaking. So just either kind of just shout out or put in the chat, or just think about, why don't most organizations measure training? Why do you think?
Cost of committing employees, or the cost of committing resources to make those or take those measurements.
Yes, that's true. And I don't understand that one because I only charge $13 an hour. So anyone else? Does anybody have anything else other that is not here? These are always most interesting to me.
We have a few in the chat, Paul. We have lack of access to data.
Okay.
We have don't know how. We have training is just a checked box.
Yeah,
Don't know how, and a fear that it may not justify the costs.
yeah, yeah. So that's a lot of what's up here, right? And I love the other ones. Yeah, so when I do these and just what I've been collecting kind of over the years is it kind of plays out like this. And it felt like this group was not that far off this distribution. But it's fun. So don't know how, lack of expertise. There's people, including me, if you ever need any help, to implement these kind of strategies to measure the impact of training. And certainly, I mean, when I was at American Express, I was a one-man team. My salary wasn't that high. But the key here is you have to dedicate a resource to evaluating the impact of training beyond, right, dedicated. That means beyond anybody that's already in L&D that has a full-time job, right? So if you're developing training, designing training, delivering training, or manage training, you shouldn't get tapped on the shoulder and say, by the way, can you also measure this? That just doesn't make any sense. And that's not fair to people who already have a lot to do. So I think that's where some of the disconnect. I think you need a dedicated consultant or a dedicated internal, right? A few people that are only measuring the impact of training. And optics wise, it just looks good that the same people who don't design the training are the same people, right? The same people who are designing and developing the training are not the same people who are evaluating, right? They have too much at stake, too much skin in the game, and they're really rooting too much for that training to have impact. The other one, nobody asked for results. We disproved that, right? With some of the other research, 90-something% leaders want this. Afraid to, I've always had the best. If we found that there was a lot of behavior change and business impact, but there was not, where it kind of sometimes, I'd say 10%, 5% of the times, the benefit might not outweigh the cost yet, right? I always find some benefit for most training programs, but sometimes the benefit doesn't reach the level yet, especially if we're measuring only after 2 or 3 months. It doesn't reach the level of a positive return yet, but if you follow it and or you project out and annually what the return on investment might be, it becomes positive. Plus, what great information to have. Sometimes there's been cases where we find out that if we just chopped one day of in-person training and substituted it for an online version or a virtual version, made it much cheaper, you would have positive returns. So these measurement studies do more than just cheerlead for the training program. They actually tell you, right, these are the benefits, these are the costs, and then you could think about how do you iterate and change the program the next time around to make it a little bit cheaper so you could have that positive return. So those are always the most insightful for a lot of these organizations and most helpful. So don't be afraid to get the negative, although I have to say that happens maybe 5% of the time. Okay, so measuring the impact of your training program gets you more respect, partnership from your stakeholders, more recognition and reward for all your great work, more budget next year, and more new, if you're a training vendor, certainly more new clients and repeat business as an external consultant. If you could prove, or as an external, training house or training solutions provider, if you could, I could tell you, if you could prove that your training works and you're measuring for your clients, 95% of no training vendors or solution providers do that. So it creates a huge competitive advantage if you're selling training to organizations, right? The promise of measurement is huge. It's because it takes all of the internal, right? Those internal people internally in L&D, they don't want to do that, right? Or maybe they're scared to go into the CEO's office and present all these findings without running them by finance or whatever they have to do. So if you could promise as a vendor, and this is L&D people, if a vendor promises you to measure and present to all your stakeholders they're going to look a little bit more attractive. Okay, so what we measure. So I developed these, so this is based on the Kirkpatrick Phillips, right, model, and Kirkpatrick being the first 4, and then Phillips kind of added a level 5. And then what I added was level 6, which seems to be, at least in a lot of the presentations that I have, the most compelling part of the story. And I'll tell you why in a second. So, right, if you don't know these levels, which you probably do, if you don't know, I'll go through them real quick. Level 1, and I put a lot of cartoons. Right out of graduate school, I started putting a lot of stats and tables and stuff. And what I realized was the higher you go up in the organization, it's not that they don't grasp the material, they just want it quick and they want all that information and it's simple. So I started moving more towards cartoons and they love that, right, all the way up to the CEO. So level 1 liked it. Level 2, did they learn anything, right? We love the fact that you liked it, and the roast beef wraps were great and the coffee was hot. But if you didn't learn anything, then it doesn't matter. So did you learn anything? Next step, we're happy that you learned something, but did you change your behavior in any way back on the job? So 2 to 3 months after the training, whatever you're looking for in terms of improved behavior change, right? What is it that they're doing conspicuously better now that they've been through the training compared to maybe people who haven't gone through? Okay. If you are doing something conspicuously better on the job, then how does that affect your metrics, right? The organizational impact of those behaviors change. How does that affect the KPIs that you're stacked up against every day that the organization really cares about? And level 5, if you take that organizational impact, you turn it into dollar value where you can you put that against the cost of the training? Was it worth it, right? And then the level that I had, I've been writing about this probably since 2005, is this climate element, right? So up until level 5, you're really a cheerleader for the program. You're telling everybody how great it was. What level 6 does is it says, we understand that some people get more out of training than others, right? There's always that kind of natural normal curve, that distribution. Some people get more out of training than others. The question is why? Can you tell me about 1 or 2 factors or 3 factors that differentiate the levels of impact in my whole group? And I'm going to give you some great examples. I have an example from Verizon where we did this kind of study and separated the sample into 2 groups. So climates that maximize. What is it in the participants' environment when they go back to their job? They're out of training. They go back to their job. What is it in their climate, their immediate environment, that is either helping or hindering the impact of training, right? That's the type of climate that maximizes your return on investment, which is why I call it level 6. Okay, so any questions about the levels up until now? Because I'd like to ask, what level do you measure up to in your organization? Does anybody have a 3 or 4? And don't worry, I'm not going to punch holes in what you're considering 3 or 4.
We have a few 3s and 4s in the chat.
Okay, okay. I'd love to hear more about those, maybe just from someone at level 4. What are you measuring in terms of KPIs, performance indicators? Not to put anybody on the spot, I'm just curious.
I think I was the only one who was a 4, so I'm happy
Okay.
to speak on that one. So in terms of organizational impact, so for our leadership development training, we have at the end of it, we have our participants that go through a year-long training, present on different business projects or larger scale organizational challenges, and kind of present to our C-suite team. And then we take that and kind of run with that. So making an actual organizational impact happen, as opposed to necessarily measuring that.
Excellent. Anything that you down the road that you see may be able to turn into dollar value, whether it's finishing a project sooner, more efficiently, any performance metrics that may be hitting more of the frontline workers because of this better leadership?
Yeah, so I think for us, we have, I manage our onboarding program. And so
Okay.
what one of our recent leadership programs was to create a better onboarding program for our project engineers and project managers.
Okay.
So they created a new training plan specifically for them and having more of specific individualized outcomes for them and what they're going to be doing in their roles. So I think that it's going to make a bigger impact in terms of retention for them and making sure they have an understanding for their roles.
Wow, excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about 3 or 4, what they're measuring in terms of behavior change or business impact?
I'll just say I was the one that said earlier that my name is Julianne O'Neill. I was one of the ones that spoke up, and I was saying that previously that the reason people or organizations often don't measure it is because of the cost of committing people to doing it. And we had a small contingent of people in our L&D group that actually committed to measuring to level 3.
Oh, excellent.
And we had a really hard time getting support, not only from senior management, but from our management to take the time to put processes in place to do it. A lot of us did it anyway, but it required, it was a bit difficult because we were internal L&D professionals, internal instructional designers and trainers. And what we were trying to do was get feedback from external clients to let us know how they were doing. And that was something that if you don't have enough support from your own leadership, it's really hard to get your client leadership to go along. So it was like pushing boulders up a hill.
Yeah.
But you know, we did see some good results when we would talk to some of the clients that were, you know, the individual client participants that were willing to share it. They were enthusiastic because we would give them challenges to say, okay, are you willing to, you know, get back with us in 2 or 3 months and let us know how you did? What are some of the ways you applied this?
Yeah.
And they would do it, but we really couldn't do anything with the data because we didn't have support.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. I'm not glad about that misfortune. I'm glad you said that because it brings up a good point. One of my recommendations would be sometimes organizations get scared that you're trying to put in a framework by which you're going to measure everything. So I would say, and I don't know if that was the case with your organization, but they might get scared because you are putting in a structure that's going to then try to filter everything through that. And out the other end comes, was this training valuable or not? And so that's people. So what I always start with in all organizations, especially as an external consultant, what I always start with is pick 1 or 2 programs only for the whole year, for the first year at least, measure them pretty rigorously, put in the time to, you know, put some sound metrics in there and create some very great surveys, and then just measure the impact of that 1 or 2 program. And the point of that is nobody's going to be interested in implementing an enterprise-wide evaluation framework if they don't think there's a good story there to evaluate. So take 1 program, measure through level 1 all the way up to level 6, present that story, and I guarantee that your stakeholders and business leaders will start knocking on the door saying, can we do a study? We just spent a whole bunch of money on this training. Can we use those levels and do a study on our training? And then kind of grassroots, it just starts to grow. And that momentum starts to grow within your organization. And pretty soon everybody or most of your business units want to do at least 1 or 2 of their own training programs and grow that evaluation team kind of organically. So concentrate on 1 or 2 programs first, do them great, do them impressive, and then everybody else will be on board. That's a big overstatement, I guess, but it kind of works like that. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is how the results typically turn out. I know I've seen a lot of results come in from different training groups and best practice groups, and they all seem to me a little overinflated because they're self-report, right? They're asking organizations and L&D people what levels do you measure up to. I think this is more real, and this I base mostly on all of those nominations that I've read about best measurement that they're doing, putting out the best learning, and those competitions for best L&D organization. This is probably where is more realistic in terms of what they're doing in each level. Okay, so how we measure. Let me just say a little bit about this. So the first thing that we do is look for hard data within organizations that tell us a compelling story. It's the first thing. Unfortunately, most organizations don't have measurement and observations already attached to a lot of these levels. So if you don't have these kind of mechanisms in place already, I'm giving you a very short version and streamlined version of what you could do to get at all these levels without looking for, so I'll give you one instance. I was working with Delta Dental last year, and they promised me when we started a study, don't worry, Paul, we'll be able to give you all the performance data that you need. We'll be able to give you control groups, twin samples of people who didn't go through the training. At the end of the day, they weren't able to provide that much data, or they had a lot of pushback. Another company was Nissan. They said worldwide we have different issues with sharing data, so it was hard to get it. So what I'm presenting here is something that could let you measure level by level without the excruciating task of trying to dig up all the data, and more importantly, all the objective data without asking people through surveys, right? That's tough. So a lot of this stuff is survey focused, but it's short surveys, 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 3 to 4 minutes for the behavior change piece. But the important thing is it'll let you get up to the other levels and don't get caught, right? If you don't have observable behavior change like hidden cameras watching people work, at least you'll have a way of measuring right up to these levels. Okay, so liked it, right? These are always almost dependent on almost always dependent on surveys, right? So 2-minute survey immediately after the training. That'll give you your level 1. Always add a couple of questions about new knowledge gained right to that level 1 survey. So I consolidate the level 1 and 2 right into one survey and put it out. And it's literally, two or so minutes. Done some work with the government. They had 14 sessions as part of a training program. They had 50 questions on this level 1. So made some real quick changes there and turned it into an 8-question survey. And that gathered both level 1 and 2. And that level 2 could be creative. It could be how much knowledge did you have about the subject matter, right? Fill it in before the training. And then, they talk about how much they have after the training, right? Both of these you gather immediately after the training. Or you could simply ask a question, did you gain new knowledge and skills from this training program, right? That are relevant to your role. So something simple, right? So depending on it, this is all if you don't have a comprehensive pre-post test to look at the delta, which most people don't have. And sometimes if you're measuring up to the higher levels, you don't want to go through that rigor of writing those tests, certainly not for every training program. Okay, next one, improve key behaviors. Look at your training objectives, think about with whoever's doing your evaluation, bring together the content experts and just say, what are 3 to 5 things that people are supposed to be doing conspicuously different after they go through this training program, right? Are they supposed to meet with their direct reports more? Are they supposed to shut out all distractions and have those one-on-ones? Whatever they're doing, make sure you're keeping it to 3 to 5, maybe 5 or so behaviors that are really capture the essence of the program. And then you might ask direct reports to corroborate that. You might ask managers to corroborate that, depending on the nature of the content. Okay.
Hey, Paul, when do you suggest the behavior change part take place
Okay.
after? I mean, you wouldn't do that immediately after the training.
Great,
obviously.
great question. Right. So level 1 and 2 goes out immediately. You gather that immediately. Behavior changes typically 2 to 3 months after the training because you want to let it sit. You want to let it, first of all, it has to be observed. So a sweet spot would be around 90 days for leadership training. If you have technical training that people can really kind of apply after a week or 2 or a month, and you'd be able to observe it and they'd be able to comment on it, then you could go out after a month. So you don't have to wait 3 months. But leadership training is more like 3 months because you at least want to give them an opportunity to apply. And of course, their direct reports need to see that they're applying. Leadership training, I always like, if we're multi-rating, I always like to do direct reports. Managers don't really know what happens in the privacy of those one-on-ones and how they're being coached and everything. So if it's going to muddy the waters, leave those rater groups out. Leadership training, I like to go just for direct reports. Although some stakeholders will push back and say, no, we want managers in there. So see how much you could push. Next one, improve business, collect and compare pre-post. So this is not asking them anymore. You're out of the phase unless you're using participant estimates. You could go grab some real hard data here. So companies like Verizon and American Express with customer service, they were great because they have all these metrics at their fingertips and always linked up with someone to grab all these metrics and pull them into a study. If you don't have that, right, then you might be stuck with some participant estimates, but always go for the gold standard first, which is pre-post. Look at the pre-post data and then compare people who were trained versus people who were untrained. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that on the next slide. Okay, next one, sorry about that. Next one is partner with finance. After you look at improvement in business metrics or improvement in efficiencies, and you get these percentages, right? X% of people now their customer service scores are higher. They have higher sales. Whatever the percentages are, see if you could turn what you can into dollar value, right? Or monetary value, I should say. Make sure whatever you turn into dollar value, make sure you vet that with finance. You never want to go in to a presentation, do all this work up to then, and then get the monetizing wrong. It's going to blow up your whole study. Okay. Then finally, this sounds like a complicated added process. It's really just sprinkling a few questions. I'm going to show you in a second. It's just sprinkling a few questions into your level 3 survey. So the same survey where you're asking, did you improve X, Y, and Z behaviors? You're going to tack a question on and say, what's your manager support like? Did you have an opportunity to apply, right? Were you motivated to apply this? Is there anything else going on? Sometimes incentive programs are completely opposite of what you train to. So if you ask a few questions, then you're able to see, right, look across. Paul said he has great improvement in these behaviors. He also said he had a great manager support or high manager support, right? Mike said he has low improvement in these behaviors. Look across and you'll find, does he have low manager support, right? So you're looking, those are two people. Obviously, you're looking for correlations among many people in your sample, and those correlations are there. I've been doing that analysis for about, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, and it's one of the most important predictors of training impact beyond, facilitator and content and even delivery mode. What happens after the training is probably the biggest predictor that there is. So you want to find out. Go ahead.
Could you repeat the questions that you ask then? It's just if they have the manager support?
Right. So it always just, you don't want, I have inventory of about 10 or 12 questions that go from everything. Do you have executive, support? Do you have your peer support, right? Is there something, is this training aligned to behaviors that get recognized and rewarded? So I have a list of about 12 that have bubbled up throughout the years. So look at that. So look at something like that, and then pull out the 3 that you suspect would be the highest drivers. I wouldn't put an inventory of all 10 or 12. So the biggest ones that I use are manager support. Does your manager support this training? Are these behaviors recognized and rewarded in your organization? And are you motivated to apply? No, do you have the bigger one? Do you have the opportunity to apply these behaviors, right, in a safe environment? And you could leave off safe environment. Sometimes there's other behaviors that you're training that might rub others the wrong way. Does that make sense? So those three are the biggest.
Thank you.
Yep. Opportunity to apply manager support and recognition or reward for changing the behaviors. Just want to know if there's any conflict there, incentive. Okay. The biggest thing I could say here is the key to a great study is isolation. So the problem, the biggest mistake most organizations make is they'll have training in May, and then they'll look at 3 months, right? March, April, and they'll see a jump after the May training. They'll see a jump in June, July, and August, and they'll point to that and say, "There, I proved that training worked." And that's why business leaders are not necessarily bought into the impact of training. You have to go one level deeper and try to isolate the business impact of the training. And you do that in a couple of different ways. The train the control group is a perfect one. There's a couple of other things you could do, which I'm going to show you here. So I'll make this short. You have people go through training. You literally pull out, like they do in medical studies, giving people drugs, control group versus the trained group, right? They try to control for everything else, twin sample. And we've done these at Verizon. I've done that at American Express, GE, where you have the opportunity to do this, okay? So trained group versus untrained group, follow, and don't look at necessarily the raw scores, just look at the improvement over the from the pre-training to the post-training time. And if you have this difference in improvement, that's what you're going to take credit for, not the whole increase, just the difference above and beyond the control group. I'm going to show you a graph in a second too. Next one, if you do have a spike in performance, you can't take credit for all of it. Then you'll go, and you can't get your hands on a control group, then you'll just go back and ask participants, there was an increase in performance, how much would you attribute to the training, right? Not as sexy and scientific as the control group, but with a large sample size, these errors of the estimate go down, okay? So, and I've done these studies concurrently, and they're not that far apart. And certainly never is one positive and one negative. So they always kind of hang together. Participant attribution tends to be overestimated a little bit though. So we have a way of cutting that down, okay? The last one there, so right, most scientific, medium scientific, last one, participant estimate. That's if you can't get your hands on any data. You literally don't see a spike in performance because you couldn't get your hands on data. Then you're just asking participants, how much has your performance increased, and what would you attribute, or what would you estimate was due to the training? So participants are giving you two estimates there, how much their performance increased first, and then estimating, how much was due to the training. Okay, that's plan C, but that also, I have to say probably 30% of my studies, 25% of my studies use this participant estimation, and they're still wildly excited about it. And business leaders still appreciate that you've done, right, up to the level 3, the 4, and then you're talking about, a range of return on investment based on these estimates. They will absolutely love it because you're measuring, and already waves above 90% of organizations who do nothing in measurement. Okay, so 3 scenarios, go for the first one. If not, go for the second, and then participant estimation, plan C, which already puts you above what other companies are doing. Okay, this is just what I just said. So isolate, I put them in a cage, and the CEO, the business finance sharks trying to attack them. So protect yourself, do some isolation. Control group, again, you're looking for an increase above and beyond the control group. Attribution, you're looking for that movement, right, first, and then you're only taking a piece of the credit, a slice, by asking them to attribute. And then estimation, literally just ask them how much they improved because of the training. Let me stop there for 10 seconds just to see if there's any questions about that.
Yeah, Paul, it's Mike. Quick question.
Yep.
So at which point in the process, or would it be the 6 levels, or would it be the 3 factors on the screen? Like, at which part of what you're sharing with us would sort of tease out a negative, like a negative assessment of your training based on factors completely unrelated to you or the training content? Like, somebody had a bad attitude,
Okay.
and so they just came into the training room with a bad attitude and just kind of sat there with their arms
Yes.
crossed and got nothing out of
Yes.
it. Or the training was done at like 6 a.m. after working a long shift.
Yes.
Like, so
Yeah.
does that question make sense? Like, how do you
Yes, absolutely.
tease
So
that out?
Absolutely. So it does. Some of that you could flush out with level 1 and 2. They might just say, this training stunk. It was too early, right? They're giving you immediate feedback about the timing of the training. If they don't do it there, what you're going to look for, that's why we measure all levels. What you're going to look for is a drop off. Hey, I loved it. I learned something, and then there's a drop off and nobody applied it at level 3. That means something else is going on. Maybe you didn't reinforce it enough. Maybe there's a couple of them got demoted, or they moved to a different leader. They have a bad boss that doesn't encourage it, right? So something's happening that's making that training effect drop off or derail. The other stuff about the value of the training or other factors, those, if you suspect them, ask about that in your level 3, and then you could report on that, right? And how it affects business impact and ROI in level 6, right? So you're reporting, again, how those factors in level 3, how they impact improvement in behaviors. But what people really want to know is how it impacted business impact and return on investment, which is why I put it at the end, level 6, right? That's the total story. The other type of stuff also around climate, you could get that, you could get some suggestions or recommendations from business leaders about what they suspect might be going wrong with the training. Certainly put that into your questionnaire, literally 2 or 3 questions about the climate, and you'll be surprised the wealth of evidence that you could report back based on those. And it also is a way of engaging your business leaders, because everybody has, especially your L&D peers, everybody has a hunch why training isn't working, and they may be in different camps. This is the perfect way to tease that out. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great,
Okay.
Paul. Thank you.
Okay, so how we measure, again, just a visual, if you need to kind of sync these in. Trained group versus untrained group, just make sure that the people are twins and maybe you're testing for, you want to control for tenure or, territory. Some stores, Verizon, some stores have more traffic, so we try to control for those things. So you want to just control for what you can, and then you put the trained group against the untrained group. And always tell them what you're looking for, right? So here we're looking for, right? You could find the control group is doing great. They improved over those same months, even though they didn't have training, right? But the trained group, which is the blue line, they went up more. So that more improvement is what you could take credit for and call your training impact. Okay. Next one with the attribution. Tell them what you're going to tell them with attribution. Here's the spike. Here's the increase in performance. This is what the percentage was. This is how much participant estimate and attribute that to the training, and that equals the training impact, right? Again, these are estimates, right, or they're attributions, but many of these cut down that error, right? High sample sizes will tease out all those outliers. Okay, and then participant estimates, this is what this might look like, right? So if you ask people what's your performance improvement as a result of training, everybody might average out 12%. That's always too high. So what I do is I go back and I only use the percentage of people who said they had significant or exceptional behavior change at level 3, right? That's where you get the tie, right? And you can knock that 12% down to 3%. which is way more conservative. And be transparent. Tell people what you did, right? The only thing that's going to blow up your presentation is if you inflate the benefits and you understate the costs, right? That's not going to give you credibility. Okay, so let me say something about level 6 real quick, and then I just want to show you a very quick study. It won't keep you more than 10 minutes more, if that's okay. Transfer climate, what is it? The factors that either help or hinder the impact of training. I analogize this to a flower, right? You want to make sure after you plant the learning in somebody's head, you want to make sure it's got enough sunlight and water, right? Reinforcement. How it's done. We take the whole sample of participants, we cut them, right? We have all the data in front of them. We ask them about improvements. By the way, we also ask them about a couple of things about, their manager. How does the manager support them? That's what I did here. Total participants, cut them into people who said they had great manager support, people who said they had low manager support, and then look at all the data that comes back. Do they have bigger business impact? Do they have more behavior change on the job? And do they have a better return on investment, right? Cutting the data. Okay, so these were actually results from Verizon and Nissan. Verizon, and I use this one still after a couple of years because it was probably the most compelling difference, right? It was a make or break, but the overall average for everybody's training was 29%, right? And this was after 3 months we measured. 29% after 3 months, right? But then we cut the sample into people who had high manager support. I'm on the left-hand side, by the way. People who had high manager support versus people with low manager support. And look at the difference. Because of manager support, it was a make or break. People with manager support had 105%. People with no manager support had negative 31%, right? So imagine going back to your to your business leaders and saying, this manager support is pretty important, right? It could literally predict the impact of the training. This was same content, same delivery, even the same timing in many cases, just different manager support. Example from Nissan, not as dramatic, but still, who wouldn't want an extra $3,000 per participant being generated? This was a lot because it was a collections office. Who wouldn't want that extra revenue being generated just with a little manager support, right? So the key here is maybe you don't need to change the training. Maybe you just need to increase manager support back on the job. And I know L&D people love this because it's a way of pushing accountability back to the business leaders, right, and the business units and say, it's not just about the training content we put out. It's more about the environments you're creating that's really driving this support. Okay. As I said, I'll take 5 minutes to go through this. This study won Best Advance in Measuring the Impact of a Leadership Training Program, right? It was a sales leadership training program. Okay. So leadership training evaluation, and I show you these because these went all the way up to the highest levels of leadership. And it's literally a couple of graphs, right, with some cartoon icons on the side. But the point here is they're not expecting, and you could keep the data in, right? Put that in the appendix, put it in another version which has 35 slides. That's fine. So you want to be transparent with the data. But what you present to your leaders to impress them and to make them want more are some very simple presentations that only talk about the results. What I used to do when I first got out of graduate school, I started American Express, I would load it up with all sorts of data and charts to show how smart I was and analysis, statistical analysis. What I found was those presentations stop at the lower levels in the organization because nobody else wants to present them up to management or higher. So that the presentation stops there. You make them simple and easy to explain, the presentations will go all the way up to the CEO. Okay, so that was level 1. Level 2, we didn't have any pre-post. We literally asked the question, did you acquire new knowledge and value from this? And then got some success stories. For level 3, we targeted the behaviors that we wanted to improve, right? And you see those on the left-hand side. They wanted more than 3 to 5. So we targeted 8. And then on the right-hand side, you see the response distribution. The scale we used was, in this specific behavior, did you observe any improvement over the last 3 months? And then they would report out using that scale. This is an aggregate of everybody and all the behaviors. Just in case the business leaders were interested, I stacked the behaviors about which ones were most improved and least improved. But even the least improved wasn't too bad. Okay. Then if somebody says, right, this is always a 1-2 slide you want. If somebody says, yeah, but that's self-report, we also had the direct reports and the managers weigh in on the observed behavior changes, right? They answered questions about those very behaviors. I didn't want the managers in. They pushed for managers. I just wanted the direct reports and the participants, but you could see it worked out and kind of corroborate. As long as these distributions hang together, as long as one's not skewed to one side and the other is not skewed to the other side, you're good. Okay. We used the control group technique, as I showed you before, trained versus untrained. That was one good thing, great thing about this study. They staggered people going through the program. So there was this great opportunity over the summer to we had half the group was trained, half wasn't yet trained. So it worked out, right? We had this control group. If you have everybody go through a training program at the same time, which usually happens, then you'll have to use the attribution technique or the estimation technique. Okay, so as I said before, show them what you're looking for. You want the train to increase more than the control. And this is the real data, right? So we had X amount of sales and ads, they called them above quota, from before to after the training. And you could see that the control group improved too. It's just that the trained group improved more. Then we had a couple of other metrics. Some went up, some went down. But it also showed, so look at for the trained group, you could see that sometimes, right, the top bar, I'm looking at total mobile protection, that went down, right, for the control group, but went up for the trained group. That's something you really want to see, right? And this helps you tease out those type of stories. Obviously scrub the monetary values. They wouldn't want me sharing that. But the overall benefit per participant after we tallied all this up, and again, this was sales, so it was easier. But the big thing here was sales. After we did this for sales and customer service, this was a leadership program that went out organization-wide. They were like, we believe you. You don't have to do it for every business group, which is where you want to be. Right? So we did it for sales and a few of the other organizations internally first. And then, we didn't have to measure everybody. So total cost per participant, put that against the benefits. And that 29% means for every dollar invested, we made back $1.29, simply put. And if you could get that there in 3 months, then that's amazing. Then we had, should we monetize this over 6 months, over annual benefit? So I presented this table. Some directors wanted to present the annual version. Some people just said, we're good with the 3 months. So that's more of a style and approach thing. Last thing I just want to point out here is we also asked about manager support, right? And then I showed you this already. This is how it broke out because of that manager support, right? And that was from the Verizon study. And then obviously what every company or every L&D organization leader wants, imagine having these one-pagers for most of your most expensive training programs within your organization, right? So I'll bring it all the way back because I'm at the end of my presentation. I'll bring it all the way back to the beginning slide where that boss was asking the woman, do you have results that you could show me for that training program we spent $1 million on? He loves return on investment, especially good studies. Max, get down. So this is a one-pager. I'm going to share this presentation. You could use this one-pager if you want to just remember the levels. And thank you. I'll stop there, shut up, and try to quiet my dog and take any questions.
Yeah, and Paul, if you share the slides with us, or you can get it to Mike and then he can get it to me, we'll
Yeah,
include it when we send out the recording and post it with the recording on the website as well. So
you got it. You got it.
Thank you, Paul, for your thoughtful and thorough and thoroughly enjoyable presentation. I've now seen it twice and
For you, for you.
and thoroughly enjoyed it both times, which is very rare for me with this subject. I guess it's not in my wheelhouse, but it should be in my wheelhouse, especially after your excellent presentations. So grateful for your coming and joining us this evening, and I know everybody on the line feels the same way. So, Paul, if you can stick around for a few minutes and maybe field some
Yeah,
questions, that would be
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Absolutely.
I gather that's your book there on the screen. Everybody check out Paul's book.
Yes, let's go. Let's take some questions if there's any.
feel free to either come off mute, or if you want to throw something in the chat, we can relay it to Paul.
Yeah. Everybody's eating dinner? Where is everybody?
You answered every question, and
Yes, excellent, good, okay.
So, Paul, you obviously have a doctorate in, I don't know what IO psychology.
IO
so-
psychology.
Yeah.
I
So for
call it
those,
PhD, it's a pilot high degree. That's
right. Well, for those of us who don't have that kind of, immense expertise in the field of data and statistics, which I imagine maybe most of us, certainly me, where would you, like, if you were doing ROI for dummies or measuring and maximizing training impact for dummies, where would we get our most, speaking of ROI, where would the rest of us get the most return if we were to begin this journey? Let's say you're at the top of the mountain and I'm at the bottom of the mountain. Where should I start chipping away at the mountain in terms of being able to measure and maximize training impact?
Yeah, so first of all, I would call me, that's number one. No, I'm just kidding. That's
So we can't afford you.
Yeah, no, I told you it's $13 an hour. Figure it's
Yeah, I wish.
all right. So I would start, every organization has their level 1 and 2. I would start with picking out a training program that you want to measure, and then I don't think it's not rocket science. I don't think that you need buy-in from your stakeholders. And then I would start with up to level 3. Write some of those questions that comes right from the learning objectives of the training. Write those level 3 questions. Stop at level 3, show them that behavior change took place, and then say, stay tuned. We're going to capture this behavior change and then try to monetize or look for business value across the organization. So that's kind of where you would want to start. Training program first and try to measure it. I think it's pretty straightforward using some of these levels that I've identified. Keep every survey short. Your level 1 and 2 should be about 2 minutes together with everything, 2 to 3. And then your level 3 survey should be about 4 to 5 minutes. That's with everything. The other levels, business impact, ROI, you could calculate behind the scenes. You don't even need to go back to your participants. As far as other resources out there, obviously there's some stuff on my website. There's this book. I also have, I do a measurement program. It's a 8-hour workshop, 2 4-day sessions for a company called Training Industry. So you could look that up. But look at my website has some one-pagers. And certainly anybody on this call, feel free to reach out to me and I could send you kind of those quick cheat sheets on how you could get started.
Thanks, Paul. Just a very quick follow-up and then I'll be finished. Would you agree that if you're an external consultant or trainer like me, that the client really owns this process? I mean, if the client shows no particular interest in doing anything more than level 1, to what extent should the external consultant push for this?
Well,
in your opinion.
So the only reason why somebody would call me is if they were excited about measuring But some people miss. So I had 2 years ago, I had GE call me, went in the first 3 months, they didn't have a lot of training that the stakeholders wanted to measure. So there was, we got into a rhythm then where they started, and again, I used my method, show them one program, measure deeply and pretty comprehensively. And then everybody started piling on saying, can we measure our program? So clients, are you talking about internal clients and business leaders that you need to push to measure their training, or you're an external consultant and you're trying to get clients interested in measuring?
Yeah, I guess it's the latter one. I mean, I'm an external consultant who clearly has an interest in what you're doing. Otherwise, we would have invited you. So, but not all of my clients, are that interested.
Yes. So do this. So whatever you're offering as an external consultant, and this method could apply to almost any initiative that you're offering, right? Every initiative is, you get it, you either like it or you don't. You're either learning something is going into your brain that you're going to use or not. Then you're either going to use it and practice something different out in whatever you're doing, right? So the levels apply to just about everything. I would say, as an external consultant, whatever you're offering, also offer to follow up and measure the impact of whatever you're doing. And you will already put yourself above all of the competition out there that really doesn't provide any follow-up. And if you need help measuring that follow-up, there's also my number up on the screen. I'm just kidding.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So offer measurement is a competitive advantage, and I guarantee you'll beat out your competitors, regardless of the class.
Thank you. Other questions for Paul? Make him earn his $13 an hour.
Well, if not, thank you, Paul. This has been phenomenal.
Yes.
This can be a dense topic, and I think the way you break it up makes it a little bit easier to understand.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, let me just echo that. Again, thanks to Paul for taking the time this evening and sharing his wealth of knowledge with us, and for his graciousness in agreeing to join us this evening. And thanks lastly to all of you for carving out 75 minutes or so from your busy evening to come and join us. We really appreciate it. And I know I speak on behalf of Josh and Suzanne and the other officers of our organization. We couldn't do it without all of you. So if you liked it, tell a friend or two or three, and we hope to see you out there at another event real soon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.